Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Friday the 8th of August. In London, I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Israel's Security Cabinet votes to take over Gaza City in a further escalation aimed at toppling Hamas in the devastated Palestinian territory. White House economic advisor Stephen Miran is nominated by the US president to fill the empty Fed seat. Plus, Bloomberg analysis finds playing by the rules costs Wall Street an extra 51 million hours of work. Let's start with the roundup of our top stories. Israel's Security Cabinet has approved a plan to seize Gaza City despite increasing international isolation. The plan involves stepping up military operations in the territory's biggest city in what Israel's government sees as a final push to defeat Hamas and rescue the country's hostages. Speaking to Fox News before the vote on the plan, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel doesn't want to keep control of Gaza.
We don't want to keep it. We want to have a security perimeter. We don't want to govern it. We don't want to be there as a governing body. We want to hand it over to Arab forces that will govern it properly without threatening us and giving Gazans a good life. That's not possible with Hamas.
Netanyahu's military already controls some 75% of Gaza, having displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians whose homes have been reduced to ruins. The Israeli Prime Minister has not articulated a clear post-war vision for the territory and has faced calls by far-right coalition partners to annex and depopulate the Strip. But moving troops and tanks into Gaza City, home to as many as 1 million civilians, pits Netanyahu against the views of most Israelis. The escalation comes as Israel risks becoming a global pariah over the spiralling humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Dozens of international governments have spoken out about worsening starvation in the territory. The UN Secretary General's spokesperson, Farhan Haq, has warned Israel risks worsening suffering in Gaza.
We've already made clear the fact that the occupation of the occupied territories cannot and must not continue. It is not accepted under international law. Regarding the comments, we'll have to see what actions the government takes, and we will respond accordingly. But we've already made clear our concerns that any expansion of the conflict will be catastrophic.
Farhan Haq, UN Secretary General's spokesperson, speaking there. The US ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, earlier this week said that America backed Israel to make what he described as tough decisions. The chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisers, Stephen Miran, has been nominated to replace Adriana Kugler on the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. The US President Donald Trump nominated Miran to fill the job until the term ends in January. Speaking to Bloomberg ahead of the announcement, Miran said he wasn't expecting the White House's trade policies to affect inflation.
We've been running higher tariffs in this administration since the very first day, since January 20th. We've now got several months of data, and again, there's just zero macroeconomically significant evidence of price pressures from tariffs.
Miran's comments suggest the appointment may add to the central bank's already dovish tilt. His temporary posting lasts until January and gives the US president more time to consider who will be his next Fed chair. President Donald Trump says that he would be willing to meet with Vladimir Putin, even if the Russian leader hadn't agreed to sit down with Vladimir Zelenskiy. The US and Russia have agreed on a venue for a meeting between their leaders as President Trump tries to force an end to the war in Ukraine. The US president was asked by reporters in the Oval Office if the meeting meant that he wouldn't penalise Russia for missing a US deadline of reaching an agreement.
Is your deadline still standing for Vladimir Putin to agree to a ceasefire tomorrow, or is that fluid now?
It's going to be up to him. We're going to see what he has to say. It's going to be up to him. Very disappointed.
President Trump's White House has considered a range of options to put pressure on Russia, including secondary sanctions. But President Trump has voiced growing frustration over Putin's refusal to accept a ceasefire.
Tokyo's top trade negotiator, Ryosei Akazawa, has said the US confirmed it would end the stacking of universal tariffs on Japan and cut car levies as promised. His comments followed talks in Washington to clarify details of last month's trade deal reached between the two countries that included a 15% tariff being applied to existing levies on Japanese products. Erika Yokoyama, Bloomberg's economy and government reporter, reports from Tokyo.
Other pending issues is that Japan has been saying that U.S. agreed to lower the car tariff and auto part tariff to 15%, which are both key exports for Japan. But it's still unclear when the U.S. will make these changes as well.
Erika Yokoyama, speaking as Akazawa, said US officials expressed regret the stacking rule had been applied to Japan despite a verbal agreement. He added that Washington said it would refund any overpaid levies, though it didn't provide a time frame for doing so.
The Bank of England has cut interest rates to a 2-year low after an unprecedented revote. So in the end, the Monetary Policy Committee voted 5-4 in favour of reducing rates to 4% after a deadlock forced a second round of voting. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says the decision required careful consideration.
We've actually never had to be in this situation of having to have 2 votes to produce the majority. Absolutely fine, we can do that, not difficult. But again, I think it's a reflection of just how finely balanced the situation. So my message to markets is, look, this is a very finely balanced situation.
The Bank of England's Andrew Bailey speaking there. Money markets reduced wages on the extent of rate cuts after that news, with the chances of a further rate cut in November now seen as less than 50-50.
Well, OpenAI is rolling out a new artificial intelligence model called GPT-5 as advised to stay ahead of rivals in the United States and China. The technology is designed to be more capable of coding, creative writing and reasoning through complex queries. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman called the new model a major upgrade. He told reporters that for the first time, it really feels like talking to an expert in any topic. OpenAI's Chief Operating Officer Brad Lightcap will be speaking exclusively to Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde later today.
Those are our top stories. Let's take you through the markets. Stocks in Asia are rising. They're being led higher by Japanese equities. The Nikkei 225 surging 2% after that relief over US tariff rates. The other major story is that gold futures have started to diverge quite dramatically between New York and the spot price in London because of the possibility of a surprise tariff on gold imports into the US. This is a story in the FT, but it has moved markets, it would seem. In terms of other stories that we're thinking about, so stock futures this morning, US Stocks 50 futures are up by 0.3%, S&P 500 E-minis up 0.2. Oil heading for its worst weekly loss since June, with Russian energy supplies also in focus.
In a moment, we'll bring you the latest on Israel and Gaza, plus how Bloomberg has calculated the time Wall Street firms are spending complying with post-crisis financial rules. But another story that we've been reading this morning. Do you know any Henrys, high earners, not rich yet? Well, now he's got a French cousin called Nicolas. Bloomberg opinion columnist Lionel Laurent's been writing about this. It's a social media meme that's been attracted a lot of attention in France. The meme is Nicolas pays. So Nicolas is a 40-something French working a steady job, feeling utterly, quote-unquote, by Lionel, screwed. He sees older generations with pensions that he'll never have, pays high taxes to a state whose handouts he doesn't get, and now he's being told he'll have to work for less to fix a hole in the public finances as well. Now, Lionel writes that Nicolas is potentially cruder or more populist than his English or American counterparts, but with very tongue-in-cheek, Lionel writes, Nicolas is also a little whinier, given that France isn't a terrible place to be, and one suspects that Nicolas is out of the office in August. But look, it's despite the fact that many are saying this is a Trojan horse for the far right, it's something that politicians in France do need to worry about with the eyes on the next election as well, that people are feeling worse off, those who are high earners and working and contributing, but not necessarily feeling the benefits of what they're paying their taxes for. Could that be something that brings a populist candidate to the Elysee in 2027? So, funny meme on the internet, something that perhaps politicians should be taking seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is a developed world issue, isn't it? The fact that wages have stagnated for so many years means that a lot of people who might not otherwise feel the pressure actually kind of do. I mean, I wonder whether the house price issue is the same in Paris as it is in London and the UK.
Well, Nicolas also points out that, you know, Parisian Nicolas has his health insurance, he's got schools within walking distance, he's got access to childcare tax credits. There could be people in London who are looking very jealously at the situation that this parody, I suppose, is facing. But it's a very interesting read about sort of taking the temperature on where French public opinion is, and one of the questions that's being asked as we're thinking about the long road to that next election.
Now, let's move on. Let's bring you up to date with events in the Middle East. Israel's Security Cabinet has approved a military takeover of Gaza City, marking an escalation of a conflict that has already devastated the Palestinian territory. Our head of Middle East and North Africa coverage, Stuart Livingston-Wallace, joins us now for more. Good morning, Stuart. How significant, then, is this decision by the Israeli Security Cabinet? What will it actually mean in practical terms?
Very significant. I mean, it's been a fairly slow build-up to it in the sense that, there were first reports about this happening earlier in the week, and the Security Cabinet, I think, was originally supposed to meet on Tuesday. That got delayed. Now, this is speculation on my part, but I think it's fair to say that there was probably delayed for just trying to get some sort of consensus on what this plan should look like. And the final plan, as approved last night, does fall somewhat short of what had been spoken about earlier in the week, which was a complete takeover of Gaza. I mean, this is pretty close to that, but it's not quite there. So in practical terms, it means a great deal more conscripts are going to have to be drafted up. That's going to take a couple of weeks, and you're going to have something like 6 divisions of the army involved in this particular operation, which is going to be focused around Gaza City.
Does this move have public support in Israel?
No, and a long way from it. I mean, by a wide margin, there is opposition to escalating the conflict, which, has been going on for something like 22 months. Now, a lot of that is centred around, I think, deep concern that if the IDF expands its operations into Gaza City, that potentially puts the lives of the remaining hostages in Gaza at risk. And we think there's something like 20 left alive, something of that order. So that, I think, is the deepest concern. And then again, that there is no real clear post-war plan. So Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has spoken about handing over Gaza at some point to an Arab-led civil administration that will not include Hamas, that will not include the Palestinian Authority. But quite what that might look like, no one really knows.
Does Israel have the support of the US? How is this decision going to be received amongst Israel's allies, neighbours, and others who are concerned about the humanitarian toll in Gaza too?
So, I mean, it's a little early to have a reaction, I think, particularly from the Arab world and then further afield, but we would anticipate that coming later today, and I think everyone would be very surprised if it was any different to the comments we've already had, some of which you've played on the show, in the run-up to this decision by the Security Cabinet. In terms of the US position, that's an interesting one. I mean, we had an interview with Mike Huckabee, the US ambassador to Israel, a couple of days ago, and his broad line was that the US would support Israel in whatever tough decisions it had to make. So it was not entirely explicit in terms of an unequivocal support for a specific decision, but it was clear that the US was not necessarily going to oppose it. And I think in terms of the international reaction, potential action at the Security Council, at the UN and so on, that is quite telling because, of course, they can veto any decision that is made there.
OK, Stuart Livingston-Wallace, ahead of our Middle East and North Africa coverage. Thank you.
Now, new data compiled by Bloomberg shows that rules put in place by US regulators after the global financial crisis have created 51 million work hours per year. It is a timely assessment of the workload as regulators are now considering which rules to keep and which to scrap. Our senior finance reporter Laura Noonan joins us now for more on this story. Can you tell us a bit more about then how you arrived at this number? I mean, the global financial crisis is quite some time ago now. Why did you go looking for the figure also?
So I guess, hi, Cara, thank you for having me on this morning. So I guess to bring you back, we've been talking a lot about deregulation heading into this year and the turn of the cycle. And a lot of the conversation is focused around things like capital and the extra money banks in particular are required to hold. What we want to do is take a more holistic look at it and say, OK, there's capital, but there's also a ton more rules to follow, there's a lot more admin. So we decided to go back and try to add up how much that extra burden was. We looked at it a number of different ways. It was very difficult. But in the end, we found disclosures which actually, at the point a rule is created, it has to estimate how much paperwork it adds on for the industry affected. So we added up a lot of those over time, and we came to a figure of 51 million hours per year across the US financial industry. The reason it's relevant now is because we're talking about peeling back a lot of those rules, and people who are looking at banks, say analysts, investors, are thinking about, okay, if these rules get peeled back here, what is the prize? Part of the prize is, say, for banks, they have to hold less capital, but part of the prize is also that some of this work should over time fade away, and there will be cost savings to that.
Laura, how does this feed into the regulatory debate now?
So I think at the moment there are comment periods open in the US where the regulators are looking for feedback on which rules they should be looking to take away, which rules don't work very well anymore. And we can expect to see that some of the rules which have been the most burdensome are likely to feature there. There's also some rules which the SEC, in particular the Securities and Exchange Commission, is already getting pushback on because it just imposes such a high level of burden on the firms actually doing this work. And one of the other things firms have really struggled with is because in the US there are a lot of different regulatory agencies, and in this piece we have Jamie Dimon's famous spaghetti chart showing all the different ones, and they feel like burdens are heaped upon burdens so that they end up doing the same thing in a slightly different way for lots of different agencies, and that just adds to inefficiency. And I think one of the other things that's really happening in the US is, aside from deregulation, which we can have any views on, there is a real effort to try to streamline regulation and make it more efficient. And I think some of these things, when you look at them, they're not very efficient.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.